Hello to everyone. I'm so pleased that you've all been able to join us today. My name is Leslie Arnott. I am the Consumer Partnerships Lead for the Women's Health Research Translation and Impact Network. And I'm really excited about this session today. Not just a meal, exploring food experiences and preferences of culturally and linguistically diverse hospital patients. My speakers today are four fantastic, wonderful women, headed up by Vanessa Carter, who is a senior clinical dietitian and clinician researcher at Western Health, and she's committed to advancing person-centered nutrition care with over 25 years of dedicated experience in the acute care setting. We also have Vicki Barrington with us today. Vicki is a dietitian at Western Health and is passionate about removing the stigma around hospital food and improving both nutrition and the mealtime experience through a patient-centered approach. Vicki, you're talking my language. We also have Associate Professor Daniel Hitch, and Daniel provided some research support to this project that you're just about to hear about. And Danny is a Associate Professor of Occupational Therapy at Western Health and Deakin University. And she has an enduring commitment to social and healthcare justice for diverse communities. And Danny and I are kindred spirits in that space, I have to say, followed by Tanya, who is a research fellow in Aboriginal health at Western Health and Deakin University and is interested in communication, chronic conditions, and self-determination with Aboriginal peoples, also a kindred spirit. We've got a terrific presentation today from these wonderful committed women. And as this session is actually so jam-packed, it's fantastic, but I'll get you to hold your questions until after the presentation is finished, and then I'll open it up to the floor. But first, I'd like to hand you over to Tanya, and Tanya's going to do our acknowledgement of country. So take it away, Tanya.
Thank you. Thank you for the lovely introduction. So we as a group acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as custodians of the lands on which we live, work and learn, and we pay our respects to elders past, present and those to come. We especially take this time to recognise and honour Indigenous women here, as well as those who have gone before us. We look to their collective wisdom in guiding our work and seek continued partnership as we work together to improve health outcomes for all women living in this land. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Vicki Barrington, and I'll be starting off the presentation, and then Vanessa will be following after me. So just starting off, hospital food plays a vital role in patient recovery, and currently there is limited research into COLD patients or culturally and linguistically diverse patients' meal experiences and preferences. Western Health provides care to patients from over 150 linguistic and cultural backgrounds, with about 40% of our inpatients identify as belonging to a COLD community. However, despite the diversity of our local community, greater than 70% of the hospital menu reflects an Anglo-European palate, with limited availability of culturally specific meals and the menu only available in English. This study was undertaken in response to this misalignment with the aim to explore the meal experience and preferences of COLD patients at Western Health to inform culturally relevant menu development. I'm going to really quickly go through this method slide because it has got a lot of information there, and if I spend too much time on it, it will take up the whole talk. So a mixed methods convergent parallel design was used to explore meal satisfaction, and basically what that means is we had a mix of quantitative data from structured meal experience surveys that are administered as part of routine care to all our inpatients, and that has roughly 12 questions assessing meal quality, variety, taste, menu access and nutritional factors using a 5-point Likert scale. And then to gain insights more into the meal experience, we obtained qualitative data from running 4 focus groups from our top four multicultural communities, which were Asian, Mediterranean, Indian subcontinent, African and Middle East. And then from that we actually used descriptive statistics and for our qualitative data, and quantitative data was through a thematic analysis. Next slide. Okay. When we move on to our results, the cultural backgrounds of the participants can be seen here, where we had in our meal experience surveys, of which we had 212, our non-cold patients, which were are largely our Australian, New Zealand, USA and Canadian patients, were 119. Our cold patients were 92, and from that Mediterranean were 22%, Asian 13%, African 4%, and Indian 4%. So they're our top 4 culturally diverse groups here at Western Health, and then we ran our focus groups with this, and you can see there that in our 4 different focus groups we had roughly 8 participants in all of these groups. But as we worked through our project, as we had further engagement with our consumers, our project actually shifted from into co-design, as we sought to actually create solutions by involving all stakeholders directly in the meal design to ensure authenticity and more comprehensive and user-centered outcomes. So it was really at the point of our focus groups that we really shifted from working on rather than for our consumers, and working with them. So what this actually did was shifted our perspective from our single correct solution, or the aim that we had, and we actually started to explore multiple potential outcome variations. Moving on to our meal experience surveys, in data not shown, there was all patients had very similar feedback for receiving enough food, having enough time to eat their meal, and the temperature of the meal. However, when it came to meal variety, cold patients were less satisfied overall, with Asian and African patients reporting notably less satisfaction with meal variety compared to non-cold patients. And when we actually look at taste, the cold patients again were less satisfied, with Mediterranean, Asian and African groups all reporting less than 15% less enjoyment compared to the non-cold groups. The Indian groups reported similar levels, as you can see here, of the non-cold group, and this can probably be explained by the existing culturally relevant dishes being authentic for taste to our Indian community. And the last one I'm going to present is the meal experience overall expectations. And you can see again that our non-cold patients were less satisfied than our cold. Our cold patients were less satisfied than our non-cold patients, with a further 10% lowering of positive response, with our Asian and African group scoring 15% lower, and our Mediterranean Indian groups around 10% lower. So in summary, the meal experience survey showed that cold patients, and in particular the African and Middle East, score lower on all survey questions for meal experience.
Okay, so turning to add context to the meal experience surveys, we turn to our focus groups to hear our consumer voices, and 4 key themes emerged: the importance of cultural food, gratitude regarding the house service and the food that was being provided, accessibility of menus and the power of choice, and the role that food plays in health and wellbeing. In terms of the importance of cultural food, all groups emphasised the importance of hospital food reflecting their cultural identities and their religious beliefs. Sub-themes emerged, including a desire for culturally appropriate options, the significance of religious and dietary considerations, and the value of authenticity and tradition. African consumers, reflected that the food was very bland and not spicy enough, and Asian and Indian consumers reflected that they had very different tastes for, the curries, with Asian curries being a lot milder than Indian curries, and having that variety was going to be important to them. In terms of gratitude, consumers across all cultural groups expressed a deep sense of gratitude for the health service and the food provided, and appreciated the service's efforts to improve the menu. They generally perceived themselves to be in a relatively fortunate circumstance compared to less resourced countries, such as their country of birth. And with one consumer giving an example that in her home country, you have to bring food in, a family member has to bring food in, you don't get a bed or a meal. Many reported menu access issues, such as receiving a meal that they had not ordered, and there were few familiar foods on the menu. We have a spoken menu, as Vicky mentioned before, at Western Health, but many consumers reported that even though the menu monitors were particularly helpful, they often needed more time to comprehend the spoken menu. Consumers across all groups emphasised the value of visual and multilingual menus in enhancing accessibility, with consumers reporting that photos are helpful. Sometimes you don't have enough words to read the menu. In terms of the role that food plays in health and well-being, and particularly in healing during illness, consumers highlighted the importance of that throughout all cultural groups, including the role of food in providing comfort and an emotional boost, with one of our consumers recounting how it reminded her of when her family first moved to Australia, and in that first year they visited the hospital a lot because her father had cancer. He was facing a really scary illness and diagnosis, and on top of that he was having to navigate a completely foreign healthcare system and be looked after by people that were unfamiliar to him. And she reported that initiatives like this were really important because even the food he was receiving, it was all foreign in this scary environment. I think that if he had had food that was also familiar to him, I think that would have been really big. So at the end of our focus groups, we had developed a cultural recipe bank and had a far greater understanding of what inclusion of cultural meals and familiar foods really meant to our consumers here at Western Health. Analysis enabled us to prioritise highly requested dishes and food items by cultural group, and that could have been the end of the project, the development of a culinary food database. However, the consumers were very keen to show us authentic versions of their favourite foods and ended up extending invitations to us to go and explore their favourite dishes at local restaurants, including visiting the Footscray Market and tasting authentic congee. And you'll see from the video that after that point we looked to cook with the consumers in a Western Health community kitchen to engage in co-production, co-cooking as co-production, so that we could get the authenticity of that particular recipe right. So we'll go to the video now for the production of meals. Today we're cooking in the Melton Community Kitchen with some of our consumers. Recently visited the Footscray Market with some of our Vietnamese consumers to taste authentic congee, and today we actually have one of the CPK chefs and some other Western Health staff actually partnering with our consumers to produce congee and different versions of congee in the kitchen. And we're hoping to make that something that is scalable and something that we can replicate in the CPK or the big central production kitchen for all of our Western Health patients.
Largely being based on what our patients have said in our focus groups about wanting authentic food and engaging with our community to really bring our community with us to cook healthy and comforting food.
What's happening behind me at the moment is amazing. A good meal can improve a bad day, so food is critically important.
It's a great opportunity to be having this consumer engagement and learning from the ladies on how to make this really authentic. And we're going to try our best to see what we can do at the CPK to try and come as close or even better the product if we can.
I am a local, live in the West for many years. I'm one of the Community Advisory Committee member for the Western Health. And I think when people in the hospital, if you bring the food that from their background, they feel positive and healthy, happier, and they will well recover to be home soon with their family.
So as you can see from the co-production, co-cooking event, we really moved the research from being non-participatory and just collecting data about our patients' experience to, incorporating their participation, having their consultation involved, to that higher level participation using, co-cooking as co-production. And that was really where the magic started to happen. So we really, discovered that by making things together, we uncover unique insights that go beyond just that explicit sort of surface level information and really give us, all the authenticity we were looking for in providing, cultural dishes to our community group. So this is a picture of the congee, the consumer-led congee that's now being served at Western Health. We average around 45 to 55 serves of that per day and around 13 to 1,500 serves per month. It's available at all Western Health sites, and it started off availability just at breakfast alone, but quickly had to move to being available at lunch and dinner due to its popularity. And the feedback on that dish, in terms of its authenticity, has been very positive. So, on reflection, consumer-driven data gave us indicators about what cold patients' experiences, such as variety, taste and access, were like in terms of our menu. However, the perspective was really shifted, as Vicky mentioned before, from seeking that single correct answer to exploring multiple potential solutions through exploring activities that unlock cultural knowledge, that created scenarios and encourage that imaginative exploration, and use creative tools such as cooking to provoke different ways of thinking. And that really resulted in combined multiple research methods, resulting in that more comprehensive and authentic understanding of the end product. And that had some unexpected outcomes, as you'll see in the next video.
It's a very exciting day. We're here at the Central Production Kitchen, or the CPK, and we're doing our final tasting of the consumer-led co-production of Vietnamese congee. We're very excited, looking forward to tasting that final product with our consumers. And the next step after this, or the final step, is to get that into the menu cycle. So we're very excited that this process has come full circle now, and we can't wait for our patients to be trying this product as well.
And I guess from my perspective, I did, know that consumer involvement was important. But until I met these ladies, I didn't really understand the impact, the positive impact it could make to our product development journey. So I think it was an eye-opener for my whole team. So it's been a project that has brought everyone together, from our staff to our consumer advisors, and soon enough for our patients.
I tried out today and I'm loving it, and I really enjoy the journey of creating this outcome of the congee, and I hope the patients will enjoy it in the near future. Thank you very much.
We're in the final stages of the congee co-production today. We've actually had the congee enter the menu cycle, and it's been heading up to the wards, to the patients. It's very popular. We started off with it just being available at breakfast, and now we've had to move to its availability going to lunch and dinner as well.
We thought that serving authentic congee to our patients would be the end of the Not Just a Meal project, but it's actually just the beginning.
It is just the beginning, and the project resulted in a level of connectedness, joy and meaning between the hospital, the staff and the consumers. Production staff, as it mentioned in that video, became more attuned to the impact their work had on patient wellbeing, and consumers gained an appreciation for the operational constraints and the creativity involved in hospital food service production. And the outcome was a shared sense of purpose and a co-designed menu and a authentic dish
that really meets patients' needs and fosters more person-centred culture within a tertiary hospital food service system, which is quite unique. As we've talked about, we really built an iterative process at each stage of the project. We looked and sought our consumer feedback and asked participants to review the dish, the co-cooking process, etc., so that we could really make it into a continuous quality improvement cycle. Additional consumer-led outcomes included incorporating culturally inclusive foods and drinks into the menu, and also starting to have celebration days regularly in the menu cycle as well, including Lunar New Year, Eid, Diwali and Diwali. We've developed a cultural recipe bank and commenced consumer-led co-production of meals, as you've heard. And we're also working on a consumer-informed blueprint for ongoing, authentic recipe development. And a project with occupational therapy was also completed with university students looking at how to establish a visual menu. It's also resulted in expanding this process for patients in the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community, evidencing that it's a repeatable and sustainable process. Getting the message out of consumer-based research has also been really important to us. So the project's been presented both internally and externally at conferences and workshops. We've got 2 publications and another 2 potentially on the way. And some of the work has recently been featured on a podcast, and also Vicky and I were interviewed for ABC national radio program, the Conversation Hour. And in conclusion, food is not just a meal, as you've heard today. It's a vital part of patient care and can play a significant role in providing comfort, support and joy when patients are unwell. This cross-disciplinary project brought together allied health, food services and the community to provide culturally authentic meals, enhancing patient comfort and experience. Thank you. So now we're going to expand into the More Than a Meal project that we've worked very closely, obviously, with Tanya on, and Tanya wrote this side of the project, and that's looking at co-designed meal improvements to hospital meal for First Nations hospitalised inpatients. Next slide. Next slide. So, as we presented earlier, we all know that hospital food plays a crucial role in patient recovery. Factors like presentation, timing, and individual meal preferences can affect hospital intake during admission, and adapting hospital diets to patient perspectives and preferences may optimise intake and reduce malnutrition risk. However, currently there's limited research into First Nations patients' meal experiences and preferences. For First Nations people, food and nutrition play an integral role in physical, social and cultural well-being. Aboriginal communities have a higher incidence of diet-related chronic diseases, making them nutritionally vulnerable. A study of Aboriginal people who self-discharged from hospital found that unmet need for nourishment was one factor contributing to this. Early discharge also poses significant health risks, including worsening of not only medical but nutritional issues, as well as increased risk of readmission. Thus, access to culturally appropriate food plays an important role in patient recovery and well-being. So our aim was to seek feedback from First Nations patients and healthcare staff to determine influences on food choices and their experiences with hospital meals. So what we did, again, was a qualitative descriptive study, and we used an informed co-design process. We ran 2 focus groups, one with consumers who were ex-patients or carers, and the other with Aboriginal hospital liaison officers, using semi-structured interviews to explore traditional and comfort foods and barriers to meal satisfaction, and any recommendations they had for hospital food service improvements. We interviewed Aboriginal Health Liaison Officers and two Aboriginal Health Liaison Officers and 3 consumers, and all 5 participants and 1 researcher identified as First Nations. 4 of the 5 participants were identified as female, and the age range of the participants was from 26 to 71 years. Oh, yes. So, in terms of results, 4 key themes emerged, including intersectionality, identity, and an individual's characteristics, food and meal challenges in mental health units, cultural connection and therapeutic approaches, and lastly, food security and discharge support. So in the first theme, participants described how personal characteristics like disability, chronic health conditions, cultural identity, and treatment side effects shape their food choices and their experiences of hospital meals. Food was not simply a nutritional necessity, but an expression of control, comfort, and identity. For many, dietary decisions were inseparable from disability or chronic illness. Several participants managed conditions that required specific approaches to eating, with one participant reporting, "I've got autism, and so I eat a lot of bland foods and I've got a lot of sensory issues, but I like pasta, rice, and love spicy foods." Others described the need for staff to recognise functional limitations. "My son has a disability. He wouldn't speak up. He was starving." And they didn't realise he had no teeth and he was getting nothing because he couldn't eat it. These experiences illustrate how unrecognised disability and health conditions can result in neglect of basic nutritional needs, undermining both safety and dignity in care. And food choices were closely linked with autonomy and sensory appeal. Some participants were really happy with hospital meals, while others described a desire for food that was closer to what they'd cook at home. Appearance and familiarity were key motivators for eating, particularly for unwell patients. One said, "It's important for hospital food to resemble what I eat at home. I'm very fussy." The second theme addressed the particular meal challenges in mental health settings, and I'll talk about each of these: the timing of meals, the variety of meal choices, and cooking activities that were snacks rather than meals. Regarding the timing of meals, one participant said they were quite consistent with the food. It came at a certain time every day, but if you weren't hungry at 5, you'd have to eat when your food comes. And another sub-theme was the variety of meal choices. They wouldn't offer me fruit in there, so I didn't have a piece of fruit for nearly 6 weeks. And cooking activities were snacks rather than meals. They said there are 10 patients in the kitchen with 3 workers. In the third theme, participants said that food is a means of connecting to culture as well as a way of educating non-Indigenous people on our culture. Participants expressed different degrees of connection to culture, often shaped by intergenerational experiences of colonisation. Some recalled learning from elders about bush food and traditional knowledge, while others were still reclaiming their culture after family disruption. These diverse narratives reflect the enduring impacts of colonisation on cultural food practices and underlines the need for food services to recognise and support varied levels of cultural connection. Food security was a big source of concern for our First Nations people. So food security is a basic human right. Food insecurity refers to the lack of consistent access of enough food to live a normal, active and healthy life, and includes both the quantity and the quality of food. The theme food security and discharge support reflected that food security was affected by particular household characteristics, such as a large household, household members with disability, lack of a driver's licence and chronic health conditions. So, what were the next steps? And like the previous study that Vanessa and Vicky spoke about with the called community, Our participants also suggested developing culturally appropriate meal options within the existing hospital menu for all inpatients. In response to this feedback, the same people that were on the previous video, so the health services head chef, food services manager, dietitians and I invited the study participants to co-cook a cultural dish in an Aboriginal community kitchen. So it was at Cooinda in Sunshine North, and the first dish we co-cooked was fish in lemon myrtle sauce. And it has the dual benefit of providing not only a culturally appropriate meal, but also educating non-Indigenous patients and staff on First Nations cuisine. So we'll show you a very brief video of our participants cooking at Cooinda. Sorry, almost there. Danny's doing a fine job here getting the video started. In addition, consideration's been given to the inclusion of native teas on the menu cycle. So we've sourced potential native teas, and it's been an interesting process. We've discussed that with our pharmacy for advice on the safety of the active ingredients in the native teas for people with chronic health conditions, breastfeeding mothers, and for interactions with prescribed drugs. And the advice was that a native mint tea was the best and safest option. So we're going to look at either getting that as part of the regular regular hospital menu, or as part of NAIDOC week celebrations, or both. So as Vanessa spoke about in the previous presentation, there have been and the hospital's annual cultural food celebration calendar now has things like Eid and Diwali, and also includes NAIDOC. So last year we had, you can see in the top right hand corner, finger lime cookies sourced from an Aboriginal company, and information on a card designed and printed by an Aboriginal business that was about the meaning of NAIDOC, and also information on Willumbabang, our Aboriginal health unit. Participants suggested creating an accessible Indigenous garden and therapeutic space to enhance cultural connection. So in response to this recommendation, we're moving towards an Indigenous garden at Sunshine Hospital, which we hope will be developed and maintained by clients and staff from Western Health's Westside Lodge. So Westside Lodge is a dual diagnosis mental health and drug and alcohol facility where people generally stay for 3 months. And in terms of food security, participants proposed potential solutions to food security on discharge in terms of take-home meal support. But we're actually going to go a step before that and survey our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander patients to gauge the real level of food insecurity in the population. And then our dietitians, depending on what comes from that, may consider how to make complete frozen meals available to our patients on discharge. So what we kind of envisage is that there would be a freezer in Willumbabang with snap frozen meals in there, so that if the ALOs, the Aboriginal Hospital Liaison Officers, complete a short food security survey with patients prior to discharge, if they are experiencing food insecurity, they could, just like they take home their medications, they would take home some hospital meals as well. And perhaps also, some information about food resources within their community. We're getting towards the end. So the strength of this study lies in First Nations participation throughout. Don't be, of course the numbers were small, but participants were just so forthright and generous in their suggestions for making the food experience within the health service better. It was amazing. And just before we break for discussion, I wanted to share this IATSIS resource and research framework evaluation for you. And certainly we should be aiming for the top of the pyramid. I've found it helpful for working with my community in these terms. I believe this project is with MOB, as the projects have been run in partnership with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander patients, families and healthcare staff. So I'll stop there and we'll open it up for questions.
That because you had such wonderful consumer involvement, that staff or researchers were enlightened. Can you share something like that with me?
I think I can remember when we first were in the community kitchen cooking with our Vietnamese community, looking at that authentic congee dish. Our head chef from the Central Production Kitchen, felt fairly confident that he would be able to make a congee. And actually, I think it even goes back before then, when we went to the Footscray market and tasted the congee that they like to, consume. He already in tasting that dish said, "Oh, this has got a depth to it that I don't think I could achieve, in my recipe that I was thinking about cooking to produce congee." And then when we went into the kitchen to cook with the consumers, we all, saw things about the way they prepared the chicken. They rubbed the chicken down with lemon leaves to, enhance that lemongrass flavour that they added to the base of the congee. And again, he hadn't seen that, we hadn't seen that done before in terms of the preparation for that dish. So that was a really, lovely moment where he was, very open to learning something new, and then taking those tastes and those flavours back to the big Central Production Kitchen and having to, scale that up, because they produce up to, as I said in that video, 1,000 meals a day. So we don't just, produce a pot of congee, which we serve out to the family. It has to be produced on that large scale. And again, he fed back that it took quite a long time to get the recipe right, because they have to retort it in their large machines. And each time he went through that in the beginning, it would come out like a pudding, not like a soup. So, he really worked to get not only the taste and the flavours right, but the consistency right that reflected the consumer dish as well.
And also,
Brilliant.
I think because he met the consumers, it had that different effect on him, that he almost had that real challenge of, I really want to make this right, where I think if we hadn't involved the consumers, he wouldn't have had that lens on it.
It's that present lived experience of what they're talking about made all the difference, isn't it? That's fantastic. So a big question then, it's just a wonderful project. A big question is, how do we scale this up and make it available right across Australia? Does anybody want to tackle that one?
I guess, as you saw, one of the outcomes of the project is that we have developed like a blueprint, a guideline for how to, cover this sort of process off. Obviously different health services have different food service systems in place, but, getting back to the basis of co-creating with the consumers, I think probably could be done by most health organisations, if not all, and then they have to look at then how do they, how does that authentic recipe, how can they work that up in their food service system, even if it differs to ours.
Yeah.
There's the difference. Yeah, the difference too is that, you've done this hard work. You have done the groundwork already. You can actually apply right away into certain services that would have a very similar demographic that you sit in.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's not like you have to
And
start from scratch.
lots of comfort food isn't expensive. It's not like when you're sick you really want rich food. So it isn't expensive in terms of the food. Perhaps what is the expensive is that we have to pay for our consumers for their time, and that's a very new thing, I guess, in health. And I guess it's up for organisations to really come on board with that, to say that if we really want consumer co-production or co-design, we really have to put the money in there to actually help support our to pay for the consumers.
And
That's a great
we
point.
do, at Western Health, we do have a best experience and consumer team, which have guidelines and facilitate that whole process as well. So it makes it very clear for anyone that wants to engage with consumers how to do that, and what the required and expected payment is for consumer involvement as well. So I guess that side of things, like you said, that they would need to be prepared to invest in that side of things too.
Absolutely. And indeed, we're being asked to. We're this far away from it being a mandate anyway. So it's something that we're all embracing to get to the point where we can embed it where it's business as usual. Tanya, was there any enlightening moment for Indigenous peoples for your part of the program where you might be able to share something with us?
Absolutely. I think, kind of reflecting what Vicky and Vanessa said, it's the energy of the consumer group. And I think for me, it was the Indigenous garden, and that being an idea, and then finding the space, and then going and talking to people. And if there's one thing about Western Health, there's such a lot of goodwill, and the garden will happen. It's about bringing everybody together. But one of the participants in the project actually came to me about a week later, and he had the plan for the garden drawn up, and it was just brilliant to see. So it's that momentum, and it's about, research is research, it's great, but it's about how to translate that into making a difference for people. That's what.
And I think working with your community, it helps everybody to feel that deeper level of connection. They come into the hospital space and can see, I contributed to that. I helped make that happen. It really does, cement that sort of partnership and that feeling of connectedness.
Yeah. We've actually put a question out across our networks this week, and I'm really hoping that our EMCRs will actually write back to us. It's a really quick question, but it's very, very helpful to us. And I'd like to ask each one of you, and including Danny, this question, that if there was a resource that would help you connect with and involve women from priority populations specifically in your research, what would it look like? Or if you actually know of a resource, you can perhaps share that with us as well. If not, is there something that we go, this is, my blueprint of how to do this?
A project that I can talk on, it's not this one, but it was about developing maternity discussion cards with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women. So at Western Health, we have a group midwifery practice program for Aboriginal women called Galanjira, and we support about a third of Aboriginal families having a baby within Victoria. And it was about sitting down with women and their support people and maternity care clinicians and developing a resource through a couple of co-design workshops and backwards and forwards. And I think we've come up with a really good resource that women get, that they treasure, their maternity discussion cards. But what women like about the cards is not that they've been developed by midwives or by researchers, but they've been developed by other women.
Yeah.
And there are questions about finances and cultural safety and child protection and all sorts of things. But it's much more acceptable, I think, because women know that they've been developed by other women.
Fantastic.
I think
Vicky, Vanessa?
Yeah, I was going to just say I think flexibility is important. Being able to collect information and have women's participation in different ways. If people weren't able to attend on site, for them to have avenues to be able to send information and feedback and give their input on things in different ways, I think is important. When we were running our focus groups, people brought their babies with them along to the focus group. I think being flexible and open about, supporting that is really important for women to be able to participate as well.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and I also think, I don't know the right word for it, but both Vanessa and I are both not from a cold background and we're not from an Indigenous background, but we're able to actually achieve this because we all shared what we wanted best for the patients. And I think that came across to them, so that gave them the ability to trust us, which then gives us the ability to keep going and trust them. So I think that, I don't know how to say it, but I think that trust part of it and being open and genuine is really important, and that they just didn't see we were doing lip service or a token thing where we're going to get your opinion, thanks very much, and it sits on a shelf up in the corner sort of thing.
Yeah.
Something that says research can only move at the speed of trust.
Yes, I love that saying too. Exactly, move at the speed of trust. I do have to say too, in various different research projects and indeed health improvement projects whereby the focus has been on Indigenous peoples, the tools that have come out of it and the services that have come out of it are always applicable to everyone. I always find when you start with Indigenous people, it will be fine for all.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm going to bring Danny into the space. Danny, first of all, I'd like you to answer that question. If indeed you can think of, if there was a single resource that you had, what do you think should be in that resource, or what should it look like in order to connect with and involve women from priority populations?
I don't think there can ever be like a single one, but I think in terms of general principles, I think the really useful resources are often those things that look at general principles, because then they're flexible enough to be used in different communities. So the sort of work that's been done here could be maybe more easily translated into a similar demographic community, but the general principles are the same for everyone. And I think that's useful for people trying to plan what they're going to do. It doesn't have to be super detailed or specific. And I think we're all super time poor. So I think the best resources are the ones that people can pick up and use easily, things like checklists, one-pages, something that's very tangible, but I think maybe goes without saying or not that they all need to be co-produced with the consumers and the communities that they're intended to support.
Absolutely. You're speaking my language there a little bit with the principles. I've just spent almost a year developing co-productive principles at the Centre for Digital Transformation of Health at Melbourne University. And indeed, we derived them from the National Institute of Health Research in the UK, which had extensive consumer consultation in the formulation, the creation of those. And one of the principles that comes through, which all of you have highlighted so beautifully, is that the building and maintaining of relationships is paramount. And what we did was we actually took that out of the principles and we actually made it a platform that all of the principles that we came up with actually indeed sit on that. And your statement from the NHMRC in working with consumers actually has a beautiful schema of how to ethically work with Indigenous peoples. And that schema contains principles like reciprocity and respect. And, again, those are universal principles where we would all want to have that, right? So when the Indigenous suggest it, we should all go with it. I would have to say. Would any of you, I can't see any other questions in the chat so far, but I just wanted to ask all of you, is there something else that you would like to add to this session before we close?
I guess, in terms of the work that we've done partnering with consumers and working with consumers and co-designing with consumers has been such a rich and giving experience that I would be encouraging everybody to do that in their research spaces and their clinical areas or wherever they're working, because it, as I said during the presentation, it just adds another, layer of depth and knowledge and authenticity to what's being done, and their voices are really, and their experiences are really so powerful in all of this, and that's who we're here to improve services for. So I really encourage including consumers in your research wherever you can.
Yeah, it's quite fulfilling, isn't it? Not only for consumers, but for researchers and the service providers as well. I do have a question in the QA box. First of all, wonderful outcomes, they say, and congratulations to all of you for such a wonderful project. But the question was, how long did this whole research process take?
I think you can talk to, but I think in terms of the More Than a Meal project, it really takes a good year from sort of starting to getting ethics approval to running the project. And then I reckon there's another year where you're kind of translating that research into something sort of tangible and sustainable. And then, of course, there's the presentations and there's the writing up of papers. I reckon a good 2 years, but you agree?
Yeah, I agree.
And was there a, could you provide us with a snapshot of a cost differential? In other words, does it cost any more to make?
Yeah, no. The food, as I said, the food itself isn't the cost. So really, it doesn't actually cost more to make, and especially even when we're looking at
Good to know.
The barramundi. We do serve some expensive fish or like salmon on the menu, which we could swap and have a change in the menu variety and have barramundi rather than salmon, and that would actually then be cost neutral to the organisation. So I guess, taking on Tanya's thing, I guess we also have to work with the staff who provide the end product, whether that's the food or the council for the Indigenous space or whatever. So I guess it's because we spread wide, we still need some other, we can't change it just by ourselves. We actually need cooks and other people to do it too.
Yeah.
So if you took your research project and you take out all of the preliminary stuff that you've had to do, in fact, the research itself, and you wanted to scale this up and put this program into a hospital that had a similar budget with a similar demographic, how long do you think that would take?
I guess they've got to,
Piece of string, I know.
Yeah, exactly. I guess they've got to have the right people in place. Like obviously they need a dedicated food service dietitian that interfaces with, in our case, health support services that runs sort of the food service delivery system, as well as, the person that interfaces clinically. But, and the ability, like co-cooking in the community kitchen, to then scaling it up in a, whatever your central production or other production kitchen is, that's probably a process that could look at being done quarterly potentially, if resources allow for that. So it could be something along those lines.
And for us now, we do have a whole recipe bank. So our focus group, where we had 4 different cultural groups. We've only really done congee in the Asian and our Indigenous. So we still have that recipe bank sitting there, ready to roll out for some of the other groups. So a lot of that work's already been done. So we're not starting way back at everything's taking another 2 years to do.
Right.
And will this
go ahead.
Sorry. I
That's
was going
fine.
to say it's not just the cost at the end, but it's about putting cost or money behind research as well. So we've been able to do these projects through a grant.
Right.
You need to be able to pay consumers. You need to have some funds there. You don't need a lot, but you need something, and you need some dedicated time to be able to focus on the research as well. So I think all of those things require a commitment from the health service to be able to foster the research. Do you think so too, Danny?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, you would definitely need to have champions in place, but we want to get to the point whereby we don't need champions, but we need it to be so embedded that it's so important to us that it is nutrition as usual
Yeah.
instead of business as usual, I would think. I would like to thank all of you, Vanessa, Tanya, Vicky, and Danny in the background there. Thank you so much for providing us with this wonderful session today. It's actually, I don't know if you can see, but I can't stop smiling. It's just a beautiful piece of work, and I really do hope that we can scale this up right across Australia. It is absolutely brilliant. I also wanted to remind people who are here watching this session today to provide us with some feedback on this session, because that feedback really, really helps us produce some webinars that are useful to our EMCRs in our network. So it doesn't take very long at all. I think Amy's going to put it in the chat. And I wanted to say thank you to Amy Armstrong, who has been behind the scenes, helping us and to make this technically okay for today, which is fantastic. And I also encourage those people who have joined us today, and indeed those across the network, to actually answer that question that I asked our panel today, which was about if there was a single resource or something that you think you would require in order to better connect with and work with women from priority populations in your research projects, what would that look like? So we put that question across our networks. I'm really hoping to get some great feedback. So thank you so much for today. I really, really appreciate your time, your effort, your humility, and your commitment to look after our wonderful different populations that are in our land today. So thank you so much, everybody, and have a terrific afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye.